You're finally awake. The words, which sounded feminine, were the first thing Ryuk could hear as he slowly opened his eyes. His senses emerged, scanning the place he was in, a frozen room with a large bed at its center where he was laid. Slowly sitting up, Ryuk was faced with the sight of two beings. One was a female, seemingly in her early 20s, with a peculiar feature, none other than the long snake tail that trailed down the seat she was on, frosty white scales present on her cheeks. Beside her was a frost wyvern, which Ryuk found familiar without a doubt. It was none other than Isha herself, seemingly fascinated with her claws, which she kept rubbing together. Soon, she turned her attention to the sitting Ryuk and waved 3 of her claws at him. "You?" Ryuk asked, furrowing his gaze at the Lady Nagas as his memories flashed before he continued. "You're Seraphis, the Naga's girl in the top 10 rankings." He finally remembered where he had seen her face before. The lady before him was none other than the Nagas who had introduced herself to him when he first revealed Isha to the academy during the Apex Energy class. She had seemingly aged more, looking a lot more mature. Her tail, which Ryuk remembered to be 1.5 meters in length, had now reached 2 meters, even though it was coiled beneath her. "It's surprising you still have such a good memory of an event that happened nearly 2 years ago," Seraphis remarked, rising to her tail as she flashed to Ryuk's side in a blink. Her eyes scrutinized him under Ryuk's steady gaze before she finally rose upright. "Your energy has settled back, and your body is fully healed. You should technically be able to stand on your feet now." She examined as Ryuk turned his gaze back to Isha. "How did we get here, Isha?" he asked her telepathically. "Well, while you were unconscious in the snowy plains, I went out and found the Naga's plane. I originally wanted to tell you about them, but then you rushed off to that golden girl of yours, and I never got the chance. So after the battle, I decided to bring you here instead," Isha stated, but Ryuk's gaze remained on her. "Oh, don't worry about them. The Nagas won't hurt us. They've kept us company for close to a week now, after all," Isha assured him. Ryuk's eyes flashed as he unconsciously muttered, "A week has passed?" "Yes, it has. Time moves fast these days," Seraphis confirmed as Ryuk sat at the edge of the bed, placing his feet on the ground. It was warm to the touch at first, a little too warm, with sizzling sounds being released as steam escaped. But soon, it dispersed as Ryuk's unnaturally cold body temperature slowly adapted to the warmth, and he rose to his feet. His hands reached for the white cloth he had on, and he ripped it in one swift motion. Another white shirt instantly appeared on him before the cloth he wore could be ripped apart completely, ensuring that no one in the room could see his naked body unless they deliberately pierced their gaze through his clothes. In an instant, Ryuk had changed from his patient's wear to more durable attire before he moved toward the door and opened it, finding a long hallway before him. Isha followed after him, the same for Seraphis, whose speed seemed almost unreal as she zipped beside him in a second. "Are you already planning on leaving?" Seraphis asked. Ryuk nodded. "Yes, I am. Thanks for everything." "That's quite abrupt, you know?" A voice suddenly resounded as Ryuk turned his gaze upwards to the ceiling. He easily pierced through it, finding another room where a female figure sat upon a snowy white throne. Ryuk only stared at her for a while, his eyes furrowed before he ignored her and continued on his way. But then, the space he stepped into suddenly shifted. The air around him rippled, and he felt a faint sense of void dilation. In an instant, he was standing in a completely different place, an icy throne room where a mature female Naga sat upon a grand throne. She was a refined woman, seemingly in her early 30s, with a silvery crown on her head. Its peak bore the insignia of a roaring snake with 2 long fangs, and her eyes glowed an icy white, brimming with ethereal light. Her tail wrapped beneath her until it formed small steps below, and her long, snow-white hair flowed behind her as though gravity no longer affected it. "Warning! A Nagas at the pseudo-eternal stage has been discovered. Host must exercise caution." The system's notification flashed before Ryuk's gaze. "Mother!" The call came from Seraphis by his side as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows before inhaling deeply. "My greetings to the Queen of the Nagas," he said with a princely bow, which seemed to take the Nagas' queen by surprise for a moment. But then, a small tug appeared at her lips instead. "Both of your greetings are acknowledged. However, I must say, I expected quite a bit more arrogance from one who managed to conquer 3 nulls at the pseudo-eternal stage all by himself and strong enough to return to his peak after just a week of recovery," the Nagas' queen remarked. Ryuk watched as Seraphis blitzed behind her mother, her head bowed silently. "Back to my peak? I am far from my peak," Ryuk thought, still feeling a faint ache in his heart. He knew well that he had lost half his life just in that battle. He was anything but at his peak right now. Paying greetings to the Queen of the Nagas is not a sign of the lack of arrogance. A greeting itself is but an act of courtesy. And I am very surprised to learn that you knew I was the one behind the defeat of the 3 pseudo-ranked nulls. I'm pretty sure I sensed no presence throughout the duration of the battle. "Oh, your little companion there made sure of that," she said, referencing Isha, who didn't really seem to be part of the situation, lazily lying at the side. "Seems like a certain person has gotten a bit too cozy with the Nagas," Ryuk thought to himself. Based on how Isha was acting, it was clear that he was already used to the place. "You were brought in quite a bad shape, with lingering traces of powerful abyssal energy on you. This could have only been made by nulls at the pseudo-eternal stage," the Naga Queen said, a point that was inarguable. But Ryuk couldn't help but ask. "And if I may ask, how many more people know well of this fact?" he inquired. She furrowed her eyebrows but proceeded. "All the important people do." She didn't seem to say more than that. Ryuk knew she automatically meant the other 10 family leaders and most likely everyone at the pseudo-eternal stage or beyond. Tisk. Somehow, he felt a faint sense of misplaced insecurity. He had made sure to leave that battlefield with the 3 pseudo-eternal grade nulls in such a way that no one would notice his absence and deal with them behind the scenes. On Endearth, no one truly knew what level of strength Ryuk had. Most thought it was the C-tier stage, and Ryuk had always loved to let people keep doubting, to never truly know all he was capable of. He had planned to deal with the nulls and silently withdraw without anyone ever noticing anything, ensuring he could make moves in the shadows and take the enemies by surprise. But now they knew well his most hidden secrets. They knew exactly just how strong he was. And it wasn't just some small, unimportant people he could make quick work of if they became a nuisance. It was the absolute top of the abyss of Endearth. Easily the people whose swords to his neck he would have to take extremely seriously. That was never part of his plan at all, and his mysterious aura had now been ruined, especially to his most likely future enemies. "You don't seem to like the spotlight as much as I thought," the Naga Queen said. Ryuk thought of replying but stopped himself, taking a deep inhale before he opened his eyes once more. This time, horrifyingly calm and emotionless. "It's useless to complain anymore. The facts have already been revealed," he said before his eyes shadowed as he inquired. "What happened in the war? A week has passed, so I expect it to have ended by now. Were the Endiarthian armies able to prevail?" Ryuk took the opportunity to ask as a seat appeared before the Naga Queen. She casually gestured for Ryuk to take a seat, which he reluctantly did. Serpihoas came forward as 2 cups appeared on the table, along with a jug. She carried it elegantly, pouring the contents of the jug into both cups. "The Endiarthian army struggled against the nulls," the Naga Queen said, pushing Ryuk's cup closer to him before she picked up hers and took a sip. Ryuk followed after her motion and got his confirmation of the absence of poison from the system, taking a simple sip. The beverage was a sweet liquid, one that radiated an intense coldness, the best that Ryuk had ever left amongst cold drinks. "Even though they were almost twice their number?" he asked, dropping the cup on the table, his ears perking up. He had expected the Endiarthian army, with the overwhelming numbers of the nulls, to be able to make a quick ward. And with him already facing against the 3 pseudo-eternal nulls, it should have been an easy win. And yet, he was hearing they still struggled? Yes, they did, even though they held the number advantage. Our apex energy is no match for abyssal energy, after all, she stated, drawing out the conclusion and reason to Ryuk. But luckily for them, when the Pseudo-Eternals had appeared, they instantly reached out to the Pseudo-Eternal experts who quickly joined them in combating the rest of the Nulls, managing to save them from assured defeat. But even then, a total of 7,000 Indiarthians died among the 30,000, along with double that number gravely injured by the abyssal energy, she calmly called out, watching as Ryuk took a deep inhale, picking up the glass in his hands, starting to take a sip to cool off, only for the glass to shatter apart from his hard hold. Tisich, I never imagined such large casualties, Ryuk said in dismay as he watched Serpihoa's walk forward and wiped the spilled coffee away before another cup appeared as she resumed her position behind her mother. Thank you, Ryuk mused silently. But the humans surprisingly managed to avoid many casualties, though. Among the 5,000 dead ones, I think only about 300 human warriors died, and the casualties were just about 700. That's pretty low compared to the loss of other armies, especially the Titan families. Even I pity them, the Naga Queen said, and a flicker of realization flashed in Ryuk's eyes. The Titan family? I thought they were the strongest. How could they have suffered more damage? Being the strongest also means being at the forefront of it all. Just like you did. You realized you were the strongest and instantly took away the 3 most powerful Nulls away from the army to face them alone, almost losing your life to it. That's what happens to the strongest when they get too far ahead. Their power comes with a responsibility to be at the forefront. The Titans might be stubborn, uncaring bastards sometimes, but when they realized the fate of the army was at stake, they went all out, taking position at the front. It was a bold act, but it also led them to have the most massive amount of damages. Close to half their entire forces were wiped out. But it's probably nothing when compared to their true forces. After all, the 10 family forces that were deployed weren't their main force. They were minor forces that were sent just to aid the humans. But frankly, for reasons unknown, we have severely miscalculated just how powerful the second Null War attack would be. The Nulls that came out this time were too powerful. In the last war with the Nulls, Pseudo-Eternal Grade Nulls only appeared during the 7th entrance. But this time, 3 of them had already appeared right at the second. This is why we suffered such damages, even though it wasn't really that bad. Just beyond our expectations of an easy win, the Naga's Queen said. Yet Ryuk remained silent. 7,000 lives ripped apart. 14,000 more forced to the bed. Damn the Nulls. Truly, damn the Nulls. Ryuk thought silently. It was easy for the 10 family leaders, like the Naga's Queen, to shrug off such a loss as something not too big because they hadn't deployed their main force. But to Ryuk, that was 7,000 lives gone. They were people just like him, with goals and dreams just like him. Some of them even had parents and loved ones, children waiting for them at home. Yet now they were either dead or crippled. And it was all thanks to those bastards who had ripped away everything from him. It was always those bastards. Who? A deep inhale barely left Ryuk's lip. As much as he wanted to do nothing but rush into Null territory and go on a killing spree, he knew he needed a calm head to think through this. The 3rd Null attack hasn't been confirmed yet. Has it? He asked. The Naga's Queen shook her head. No, it hasn't. In the past, there's always been at least a monthly interval before the Nulls re-arrive again. But now that our analyses have been proven quite badly wrong, we can't say for sure what may happen again. But at least we'll be seeing a minimum of 2 weeks from now before we know exactly when the 3rd Null attack will take place. And even after that, there will be 2 to 3 more weeks before the Nulls actually descend. And that gives us more than enough time to prepare for what's coming, the Naga's Queen said as Ryuk nodded his head. Now that the 10 families had seen that their analysis was a bit off, they would obviously prepare even more for the 3rd Null War, and they had 3 weeks to gather their armies and do a thorough preparation. That brought a slightly hopeful situation. And to top it all off, humanity had survived the 2nd Null War, just as he had wanted. Even though many deaths had happened, and even he himself had lost half his life, humanity had survived, and 60% of humanity's population had been preserved. losing half his life for humanity's sake, having 60% of its population survive. A total number that could very well range in the hundreds of millions. Ryuk would say it was a worthy exchange. Some people have been asking for you recently. The Naga's queen suddenly called Ryuk's brows forward. Who? The 10 leaders. Now that humanity has survived the ordeal with the last amount of casualties, and the 10 families have truly banded together to face the Nulls just like you wished, they now want their side of the deal. They want to see the eternal grade expert you brought and ask her about the Nulls. The news that you have been in slumber has kept them at bay, but now that you're awake, it's only a matter of time before they're right in front of my door for you. The Naga's queen said as Ryuk furrowed his brows before he replied. Ask the 10 leaders where they want the meeting to take place. I'll be there with the eternal grade expert in at most a week, he said as the Naga's queen responded. They want it here. After all, we leaders don't need to go down with our main bodies. We can just send our projections elsewhere and convene anywhere in the world. You can do the meeting right here in this throne room by my side, and I'm sure if you want it to be done right now, the leaders have more than enough time for an audience with you. The only thing that might halt the process is the Eternal Guard expert that possesses the answers, she explained to Ryuk, who furrowed his brows before nodding. Seems like I'll have to reach Astralaxia. It's been quite a while since I last saw her. What could she be even doing now? He thought to himself before returning his attention to the Naga's queen. Thank you, Queen of the Nagas, for your help. It really did well in calming my heart, Ryuk said as she waved him off before replying with a small grin. It's fine. We've done nothing but offer you a bed and some couple potions after all. And also, you can call me Queen Snowwarnda or Queen Snow. The Queen of the Nagas seemed a bit too long and cringe, don't you think? She said with a slight smile as Ryuk nodded his head before he could take another sip of his coffee. But then, he turned his gaze toward the back of the Naga's queen and noticed Seraphis, who was bowed silently just like how a maid would. Should I be worried about a potential child abuse? Ryuk asked Queen Snow, who raised an eyebrow. Why? If I didn't hear wrong, Seraphis referred to you as her mother, and I can see the familiarity in both your features. But ever since she addressed you, she has been reduced to a position seeming more of a maid than a daughter. Is such a change something I should be worried about? Ryuk asked. Ever since he had stepped into the room with Seraphis, even though she called Queen Snow her mother, she had done nothing but behave like a maid ever since. Standing behind her silently, serving them coffees, wiping away the splashes on the table, and refilling her mother's cup. That was something really suspicious. Even Morgaine and the half-fallen one who had a skirmish bond at least related to one another very well. This looked like Queen Snow was forcing her daughter to be a maid, something that was very possible based on the cultivation gap between both of them. Giggle. A giggle suddenly rang out, but it didn't come from Queen Snow. It came from none other than Seraphis behind her. Oh, that, Queen Snowwarnda said before a melodious laugh rang out, followed by Seraphis giggles. Something Ryuk still didn't understand. Sometimes, I forget that humans and other races possess cultures unlike ours, she said before continuing. Seraphis is neither a slave nor my maid. She is my daughter. However, acting as a maid around me is a cultural tradition of the Nagas, one performed by anyone who is next in line for the throne. When the next in line to the throne stands before the reigning monarch in the throne room, she must attend to every whim of the ruler before it is even uttered. She explained to Ryuk, whose brows knitted together. It was the first time he had heard of such rules. My great-grandmother did it to my grandmother did it to my mother did it to me, and now I do it to Seraphis. If she has a daughter one day, she will pass on the tradition. That is how it has always been. Sounds a little absurd, doesn't it? Queen Snowwarnda asked. Ryuk nodded his head. It truly was absurd for the future queen to be reduced to a mere servant before the ruling monarch. That was far from normal. After spending some time with the other races, I've come to realize how backward this custom is. But this is still a generational tradition, and I don't want it to end during my reign. That's why I have limited it to being observed only in the throne room. If Seraphis meets me outside the throne room, she is my beloved daughter. But in here she must follow tradition. And a maid certainly does not giggle during a conversation, Queen Snowwarta said firmly. Seraphis quieted down, though Ryuk noticed her rolling her eyes. Still, she listened without protest. So it's some sort of traditional thing? How weird, he thought. The thoughts managed to pull Ryuk away from his sour mood about the nulls as he took a sip of the liquid before him, calming his racing heart until his mind was clear. Queen Snowwarta seemingly waited, allowing him to finish his sip, and when she saw him return to a state of calm, she asked, "How?" "Huh," Ryuk responded. "How did you get that little companion of yours?" she asked. Ryuk's gaze shifted to Isha before his brows furrowed. "I'm asking on behalf of," Queen Snowwarta was saying when suddenly, an intense, icy coldness filled the room as a voice rang out. "No need. Let me ask him myself." Kaboom! The force that followed wasn't the sound of something clashing, but pure pressure that overlapped Ryuk, his heart nearly bursting out of control from the insane power. His movements froze completely, and his eyes widened in shock as he saw a figure standing beside Queen Snowwarta. A tall woman, about 3 meters in height, clad in a completely white gown that covered most of her body, save for her face, which was partially covered in scales. Her eyes, Ryuk could swear there was no difference between them and Isha's. But what was most horrifying was, "Warning! Warning! Host has come in contact with a true being. One at the eternal stage. Host must exercise intense caution." The system's words flashed in bold letters as Ryuk turned to look at the woman in shock, watching as another seat appeared beside her, which she took without hesitation. But then, Ryuk felt Isha's footsteps. With a raised brow, he watched as she went ahead and sat beside the snow-white lady, who rubbed the top of Isha's head. Surprisingly, it didn't seem to be just a simple rub. Every stroke sent surging lines of energy spiraling from the top of Isha's head straight through her body, forming a blurry image that Ryuk couldn't quite fathom. Yet he remained in shock. This was the first time someone had triggered something in Isha with just a touch, and that was when it dawned on him. "You're a frost wyvern," Ryuk called out. As much as he tried to rein in his shock, it was simply impossible. Sitting before him, seemingly no different from a human, was actually a frost wyvern in humanoid form. He had never seen such a thing before, never even heard of one. But not only was she in humanoid form, she was also at the eternal stage. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, though her beauty could rival even Seraphis, the youngest in the room. She continued rubbing Isha's head before finally turning her cold gaze to Ryuk. "I'll ask once more, where did you get her from?" she asked. Her voice was colder than the iciest frost, and in the next instant, a mini-wave rippled through the room as a blue aura burst out from Ryuk's eyes, the same color instantly appearing in Isha's. Immediately, Isha yanked her head away from the woman's hold, appearing beside Ryuk in the blink of an eye. "Confuse not, Frost Wyvern. You do not own her, neither is she by your side." Ryuk's voice was softer than a whisper, yet Seraphis' eyes rolled to the back of her head before she collapsed helplessly to the ground. Queen Snowwarta rose from her throne in shock, her eyes flashing as she gazed at Ryuk, whose aura had fully turned blue, burning like flames around him. His aura! It's the aura of a natural beast king. How could he radiate the aura of a beast king? Isn't he human? Queen Snowwarta thought in shock. In the next instant, she turned her gaze to Seraphis behind her, and she acted, a swirl of void energy emerging around her. In the blink of an eye, Seraphis was taken out of the room, leaving only the three of them amidst a suffocating pressure that radiated from Ryuk's billowing aura and the Frost Wyvern's ominous silence. The woman finally spoke, her tone laced with intrigue. "Interesting, really? You're truly an interesting figure, kid. I'll give you that." Ryuk could feel it, the absolute disregard for his existence. He was always able to sense it when someone had no regard for him. It was like a magnet that attracted him instantly. The Frost Wyvern lady had arrived with her full pressure enveloping him particularly, or else Seraphis, who was much weaker, would have collapsed from such a wave of power. But she remained standing, which showed she wasn't being targeted by the aura Ryuk was feeling. It was Ryuk alone. Then she had attracted Isha to herself, directing the feeling of her being under her control. To a beast tamer, this would have been an absolutely hair-raising scene. One knew well that a beast tamer's strength was his beast. If a beast was under the control of another person, then the beast tamer was as good as dead, as the beasts might be reluctant to fight one they were so familiar with. Ryuk knew he was far from a beast tamer, but he also knew others would naturally see him as one. The frost wyvern before him should realize he was just a mere beast tamer, and her move of making Isha seem to be on her side and no longer on his was meant to instill fear and uncertainty. Any beast tamer would have been sent cowering in fear of losing control of their beasts. But he, Ryuk, lose control of Isha to another being? There was none in the world who could take Isha from him. No one in this world could turn her back against him. And in an instant, he had thrown the mental game away before it could even fully begin, yanking Isha forcefully back under his control to let her know who the true owner here was. She might be a true being at the eternal stage, but Isha was his and his alone, not a tool to be easily taken under the control of another just because they were of her race or stronger than him in cultivation. The mind game was something that had been well laid by the frost wyvern to strike some fear into Ryuk's heart, to make him shift uncomfortably under his seat. Truly, he had seemed too comfortable for her liking, but the one move he had made showed her he was no fool. She could sense that as she looked at Isha right now. That little creature she had taken a fancy to, one who had sighed at her yet had also taken a deep fancy for her, now had eyes that left her without the faintest doubt. She knew she would cleave her claws straight through her head and burst out her brains if she was given the chance. The control the boy held over her, it wasn't a simple, flimsy control that could be easily removed by someone being nice to her. It was an absolute control that placed her completely under his will. And then, there was this aura on him. This aura that made her cold heart surge with power once more. A slight feeling of threat to her existence lingered in her heart, a sensation she had long forgotten even existed. When Ryuk saw her eyes finally regain their regard for his existence, the power she believed she had over him disappearing from the truth before her. Deactivate King's aura. And as abruptly as it came, Ryuk's blue aura faded away, the same for Isha, whose eyes returned to their normal silvery color. But this time, she clearly looked at the wyvern lady, yet she remained by Ryuk's side, unmoving, with a gaze that now radiated no emotions at all. Not only can you fully force the will of your beasts to yourself, but you can also wipe out whatever warmth they have in their hearts toward a certain person. She spoke, looking at him with an expression that was slowly getting colder and colder. The frost wyvern could feel it. All the warmth that Isha had developed for her over the past few days they had been together had been wiped away. Wiped away, resetting them to their first stage of meeting each other. Isha's gaze was emotionless, without any warmth at all, looking at her as if she was no more than any ordinary being. That might have shown that whatever bond they had formed since the day they met had somehow been cancelled by the boy sitting before her. I didn't cancel anything, nor do I force her to my will. I simply made her aware you're not necessarily on my side. She must have trusted you and your people for her to bring me here of all places in the world. And she's still young and naive, thinking that because you're the same race as her, you would definitely find my presence lovable like she herself does. But I can see it in your eyes. You don't, neither do you have a reason to. In fact, I can swear you wouldn't mind killing me off right now just so she could get out of my control and become free, Ryuk said, his words bringing a bit of surprise into the cold eyes of the frost wyvern before a cold smile appeared on her lips, confirming to Ryuk that he truly was right in his thoughts. The thought of him being dead so Isha could be free had truly flashed in the heart of this lady. He still remembered when the system told him that beasts die along with their tamers. But then, there were cases where the beast could survive even though they would be weak. Ryuk was sure that if an eternal being wanted to make him dead while preserving Isha, especially since she was Isha's own race and a beast like her, then it must be as easy as breathing for her. because she was a beast herself and would definitely know more about the separation process than Ryuk ever could. If she valued Isha so much, she must have felt Ryuk's existence was needless and a restriction on Isha, something that should be cut off to make Isha free. But now, she knows just as much as I do. The silence after Ryuk's explanation was long, the frost wyvern True being eyeing him with thoughts flickering in her piercing eyes. Whether it was the thought of offense, anger, or amusement, no one, not even Queen Snow, truly knew. The frost wyverns might have chosen them, the Nagas, over all other races as companion beasts, but when it came to this particular one, the most powerful of the frost wyverns, there wasn't much that could be said about her. All Queen Snow had learned was to show her respect, as this frost wyvern had been alive since the era of her grandmother, bearing the highest power present in the clan. She was the ultimate authority, one whose orders she, the queen of the Nagas, could only follow. Yet, she rarely emerged, spending most of her time slumbering away in the snow chamber. The last time she had come out was when Isha arrived with Ryuk's battered body, and ever since then, she had been outside her chamber more frequently, playing with Isha, demonstrating arts to her, and being more than just lively. Queen Snow couldn't understand the reason for this. The lady before her didn't particularly like her own race, nor did she show much fervor for them. Frost wyverns were an arrogant race, disregarding anything and everything, even themselves. And the strongest of them was the epitome of this fact. She cared for nothing, was moved by nothing, and her expression was as cold as ice any time she left her chamber. But Isha seemed to change that rule for whatever reason. Now she felt like she wanted Isha for herself. But unfortunately, Isha wasn't a lone beast. She was contracted, and not just under some fool she could randomly eliminate without a second thought. She was under the command of the greatest anomaly, a genius that probably existed as the most important asset on Endearth right now. The person before her wasn't just some random ordinary boy. He was held in absolute regard by the 10 families. His actions had earned him a position of respect, possessing an Eternals-grade expert behind him who knew more about the Nulls than almost anyone. A very important key instrument to their chances of winning. But beyond that, he alone had taken care of 3 pseudo-Eternal-grade Nulls. One had to know that Endiarthians at the same cultivation stage were no match for a Null due to the difference between Abyssal Energy and Apex Energy, with the former being more powerful than the latter. Taking care of those 3 Null Wanderers would have required the help of at least 5 pseudo-Eternal-grade Endergains walking in unison to bring it down. But he, a boy whose life aura didn't seem to surpass 18 years of age, had taken on a total of 3 pseudo-Eternal-grade Nulls and absolutely wiped them out of existence all alone, in a matter of a few hours. Even though he had come out of it badly wounded, the news was something that sent shockwaves through the hearts of everyone important enough to know the truth. Right now, the boy himself might not know it, but he was an incredibly important asset to the world. His feat was something that could only have been done by someone at the Eternal grade, but he had pulled it off. And most importantly, he was young. He was still malleable and possessed both compassion and bravery, as shown by his actions, instantly teleporting the Nulls away from the battlefield at the very beginning, reducing casualties for the army without fear of his own death in the process. He had become a person any of the 10 families would kill to possess. If word got out that he had been killed by the Eternal Grade Wyvern of the Nagas family, then an Eternal Grade war might just as well spiral out of control, and no matter how it ended, only the Nulls would benefit from their weakened forces. That was something she greatly hoped wouldn't happen. Ah! A long, cold breath escaped the lips of the Frost Wyvern lady, forming a small, hazy fog that blew across the room. She exhaled heavily before turning to look at Ryuk and raised her hands. I'm really trying to convince myself not to kill you this instant, but I'm failing for exactly 3 reasons. 1, you're a beast tamer. Your kind are nothing but disgusting cowards who place their beasts in the front and cower at the back, always on the search for the next beast to add to your heaps, throwing them into senseless battles. Your so-called beasts are nothing but slaves. A few compassionate ones you might refer to as companions, but that doesn't erase the fact that you most likely took the beast not by its own compassion, but by your own selfish desires for its talent. And in the end, you prevent a beast from its true existence. Everything in the world has its mode of operation, one that is entirely different when it gets separated from its kind. You beast tamers end up raising anomalies amongst the beast world, sometimes making your beasts fight their own races and sow chaos. A particular act most of you strongly seem to enjoy. Just because you're a beast tamer, that alone is one reason for me to already get rid of you, she said, her voice cold and filled with intense hatred when she mentioned them. And Ryuk didn't even flinch at her words, not because he couldn't feel the hatred, but because all she had said had nothing to do with him. He was not a beast tamer in the traditional sense. He wasn't a beast hoarder. Neither did he ever hide behind Isha. He was always at the forefront, only calling on Isha when he wanted to get serious. And he also wasn't going around contracting beasts left and right whether they liked it or not. Even though he had 9 open contracted slots right now, Ryuk only had 2 beasts, both of whom had their own peculiar circumstances that led them to him contracting them. Not just because he saw them as tools to be used. He was a completely different entity from what a beast tamer would be, nor would he refer to himself as one. But then, one didn't need to tell him that explaining to her was utterly useless. She wouldn't believe it, so he might as well shut up and listen to her. Secondly, your ignorance, which leads to arrogance, is another reason to kill you. Ha! This time, it was Ryuk's turn to raise an eyebrow. He had not expected such a reason. You see me as an equal, do you not? You don't fear me at all. You seem to have realized I am at the eternal stage, yet you never really rose up from your seat in shock, like most I have come across in more than hundreds of years would. That's only because you don't think I can get rid of you in an instant. Your act of probing, your claim that you own your beast and that she can only be taken away from you, was something any beast tamer with a shred of pride in their heart would do for their beast. But the way you did it was borderline disrespectful. And what I found nauseating is knowing that your disrespect didn't come from the fact that you know I wouldn't kill you because I value your beasts. It came from the thought process that made you believe you would be able to survive a battle with me. If not, you wouldn't be nestled on your seat so comfortably knowing well, I, an eternity-grade expert, have the thought of killing you in my head. And for that reason, I very badly want to prove to you the vast disparity that exists between anyone at the eternal stage and anyone below it. Trust me, it'll be an instant domination, done before you could even blink. As she spoke, she snapped her fingers and looked into Ryuk's eyes before continuing. As fast as that, you'll be blown to dust, she said, her gaze just as cold and emotionless as before. But Ryuk merely furrowed his brows for a few seconds before they settled back into place. And lastly, it's because you're a headache. Oh, there's too much chaos surrounding you. You're the last hope of the 10 families. They say you have some eternal-grade expert behind you that knows a thing or two about how Endearth could survive the Nulls, and then you defeated some 3 weaklings that called themselves Null Wanderers or whatever. And now, because you're young and easily fooled, you're an important asset, and that and that and that. I cow'll end you in a blink, but the consequences of that wouldn't end in a blink. The other eternal-grade experts would probably rise up from their godforsaken slumber and come knocking on my chambers, asking for some sort of vengeance or whatever when, in essence, they just want a good reason to take something from one of my golden treasure caves. Killing you would give them a righteous excuse to barge in and carry away my life treasures, which is just not worth it at all to kill a single person, not even an eternal being yet. And for that reason I really am in a pinch right now, she said. Yet, Ryuk didn't at all find her musings hateful. It was simple and direct, just like how Isha herself was. It seemed the frost wyvern truly breathed indifference and directness, not minding whether you liked what they said or not. And of all the things she had listed, the morality of killing him wasn't even an option at all, revealing just how twisted her thought process was. But then, she was a true being. Ryuk wasn't entirely confident he could face her toe-to-toe. He wasn't that arrogant to the point he would illusion himself. But he knew well that if he realized his life could be over in an instant, the way he would burst out with might and run away would be unlike anything the world would have ever seen, and even an eternal-grade being would be in for quite the shock. He wasn't confident in winning, but he was confident in running away. A second choice that Ryuk always had in every situation and which he never failed to recognize. Well, if I were in your shoes, with risks of losing my treasures that I hoarded all my life, and also getting hate from the other 10 families, which might very well affect the Nagas, my companion race in the war to come. I can imagine if the next null portal opened right at the heart of the Nagas plains, and you had just had a battle with the 10 family eternal experts. They are strong enough to give a command to their warriors not to help you, meaning you would be risking facing all of the nulls on your own, something even an eternal grade expert would struggle to keep the death rates under control, judging from how bad the second null gate was. I wouldn't risk such an amount of death and destruction just because some arrogant brat was ignorant of my own strength or because he was a beast tamer. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of beast tamers out there. Killing a beast tamer? Fine by me. But killing a beast tamer only to lose so much? Then absolutely not worth it. I'd just ignore him instead. Ryuk said, exactly what he would have done if he were in her shoes. And he spoke what was on Queen Snowwarda's mind, as the frost wyvern furrowed her brows before she finally relaxed them. What do you think, Snow? The frost wyvern asked, turning to the author, Queen Snow, to ask for her opinion. I think he's right, Elder Selene. It's just as she said, right now, he's no different from an ignorant beast tamer. To kill an ignorant beast tamer might be all right, but under the conditions of making us the enemies of the 10 families and giving them a reason to enter our territory without restrictions in any respect, and even risking us being alone to fend for ourselves in the Third Null War, I'm afraid that's a bad thing. Besides, the boy's eternal grade expert is a key to obtaining certain secrets of the nulls. If you kill him now, we lose that. I think you should consider sparing him, for now, she said. Ryuk's eyebrows twitched upon hearing the last part, and the frost wyvern's eyes flashed with light instead. For now, huh? That sounds tempting, Snow. The frost wyvern flashed Ryuk a wicked smile with those widened maws of hers that uncannily resembled a sinister smirk of revelation. And Ryuk shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Why do I feel like I've only dodged a calamity? But it'll be coming back for my ass soon enough. Still, I want to know where you got her from, she continued, causing an eyebrow raise from Ryuk. He could really see that she was determined to learn about Isha's origins. Why? Why do you want to know where she is from? He asked directly. She replied, we frost wyverns are creatures that are both rare and common, and that depends on species differences. Species differences? Ryuk asked, and she nodded. Yes, we might all look the same, but we're not. There are hierarchies based on potential, and nothing is more set in stone than the peak cultivation level of a frost wyvern at birth. The base cultivation level for a frost wyvern is the peak of the Dominion stage. Even the weakest of us, referred to as snowflakes, have the lowest potential and weakest strength, despite possessing similar forms to other frost wyverns. The second tier among frost wyverns is the frost veil tier. They can reach the cataclysm stage and at most, the peak cataclysm stage, but that is the maximum cultivation level they can attain, she explained lengthily as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. Isha was currently at the cataclysm stage, and if Ryuk activated King's aura, her power would increase by 50%, allowing her to touch upon the boundaries of the pseudo-eternal stage. Could her peak potential be the cataclysm stage? The third tier is the glacier tier. They can reach the eternity stage, but the eternity stage is an entirely different realm altogether. Anything can happen once one becomes a true being, and potential can be artificially enhanced through various fortuitous encounters. Still, it is safe to say that a glacier tier being's maximum potential is the eternity stage. I'm guessing you're a glacier wyvern then? Ryuk mused after noticing that she was at the eternity stage. I am, but there is another tier, she said, drawing the attention of both Ryuk and Queen Snowwardo. As the Queen of the Nagas, she was, of course, aware of the rankings of the frost wyverns. After all, her entire life had been spent around them. However, she had only known of 3 tiers, the Snowflake tier, the Frost Veil tier, and the Glacier tier. But now, she was hearing that there was another tier? It's called the Blizzard Sovereign tier, Elder Selene said, drawing the attention of both figures in the room. The Blizzard Sovereign tier? Queen Snowwardo mumbled in shock. Yes, that is the highest tier among frost wyverns, and according to what I've heard, they have no limits to their growth. As long as they live, they can keep growing infinitely. If they live to their full lifespan, their power waves would be as scorching as the sun of an entire galaxy, she said, drawing a sharp exhale from Queen Snowrdo. Then Elder Selene pointed her finger. She is a blizzard sovereign, she said, pointing directly at Isha, causing Ryuk's eyes to flash in shock. He had always known that Isha was no ordinary beast. After all, she had been given to him by Uncle Bob as a present from his mother. Something Ryuk had eventually learned had no ordinary background. But a power level capable of rivaling the energy of an entire galaxy's sun? That was far beyond the eternity stage. Even though he was a pseudo-eternal being, he couldn't claim to be strong enough to solo 1,000 Cataclysm stage experts, nor could he divide the Earth in two. He doubted that even if he reached the eternal stage, he would be able to do that. But the power of the sun wave, that was a power truly beyond his imagination. Could it be true? Could there be stages beyond eternity? Or could the eternity stage really be the beginning of cultivation? Ryuk mused to himself, remembering Astralaxia's words about the eternity stage being the starting point of true cultivation. But that was just impossible. That's why I needed to know where she is from. Because a Blizzard Sovereign Frost Wyvern wouldn't be born in some random world. And a Blizzard Sovereign Frost Wyvern can only lay an egg when she is at the Blizzard Sovereign stage. Something she would protect with her very life. To get your hands on a creature like yours means standing before a being with a power wave comparable to the sun itself. It is literally impossible for her to be separated from her parents. Most importantly, the Blizzard Sovereigns are the kings of the Frost Wyverns, which means they have an entire planet of Frost Wyverns. A true home where only we Frost Wyverns inhabit. A utopian paradise for our kind. If I know where you got her from, then we can all return to our true world. That has been my ultimate goal since the beginning of time, she said, as Queen Snowrdo's eyes flashed while looking at Elder Selene. Not much had been known about this Frost Wyvern, even though it had watched over her since she had grown. The elders did not speak much of her, and she had only thought the Frost Wyverns had picked them up as companion beasts due to their equal serpentine bloodline and shared attributes of snow. They were the only ones among the 10 families that had such power over frost energy, so it made sense that the Frost Wyverns had been with them since the beginning, choosing them over the other families. But no one knew the true goal of the one before her. All the Frost Wyverns listened to her and greatly feared her. Yet, the Nagas had no idea what her ultimate goal was, and forcing out an answer was impossible since she was literally the strongest expert in the Nagas clan. But now she knew. Her goal, for more than 3 centuries, had been to return to the true world of the Frost Wyverns, their haven. And the reason she had taken a fancy to Isha was because she was the daughter of the one who was the king of the Frost Wyvern world. She was literally her ticket to fulfilling her centuries-long goal. Now, it all made sense. She's right. The information is present in my database, the system said as Ryuk's eyes flashed. She was at least honest about her goal. Now he knew why she was obsessed with Isha. She was her key to the Frost Wyverns being able to return to their true world, which had some connection with Isha. Instead of blurring the lines of her goal and trying to manipulate him, she had revealed everything. For that reason, Ryuk decided to be honest. She was given to me as an egg by my uncle, he replied as her eyes flashed in shock. By your uncle? Yes. He said it was a gift to me from my mother when I came of age. I don't understand. Wait, what age was she given to you? She asked. 16. And you are now? She asked once more. 17. Although, in Endearth terms, I could be 19 since I went to a place with a time dilation of 6 months there to 2 years here, Ryuk replied. Her white face visibly paled even more as she looked at Isha before turning back to Ryuk and then looking at Isha again. So she went from an egg to the Cataclysm stage in a little more than a year? She asked, and Ryuk nodded. That's impossible, Queen Snowrdo said, causing Ryuk to raise an eyebrow. A Frost Wyvern, from its birth, will take 0 to 4 years to reach the Ascension stage. They will spend 3 more years before reaching the Dominion stage, and then 7 more years before they could reach the Cataclysm stage, if their potential reaches that level. That, in itself, is a total of about 14 years minimum. The fastest ever achieved is 10. And you're saying she's less than 2 years old yet already at the cataclysm stage. That's a bit too far-fetched, isn't it? They asked him, as Ryuk sat down in shock. 10 years? It takes 10 years to reach the cataclysm stage? He wondered in shock as the system notification flashed. They are right, host. But Isha is an anomaly that breaks this rule, not only because of her massive potential but because of Host himself. Host has forcefully sped up the evolution of Isha using evolutionary cards, which is the main power of the system. Normally, the evolution of frost wyverns takes years in slumber, but Host was able to cut that down to mere days. Frost wyverns normally stay in slumber for long periods to gather ice mana and gain minute physical growth by devouring their prey. But Host has fed Isha very high-grade dishes that contain huge amounts of concentrated energy, further accelerating her growth. Additionally, Host's rule forbidding Isha to devour beings means her veins are not polluted with the bloodline of various beasts. Her bloodline is the purest that has ever probably existed in the universe. Combined with an unrelenting feeding of high-grade ice cultivation dishes and evolutionary cards that sped up her growth in ways that should have taken years, reducing them to mere days. Isha's cultivation breaks through all rules of cultivation ever recorded by her own race. The system explained fully, causing light to flash in Ryuk's eyes. So it was all due to the system, huh? It's true, Elder Selene said to Queen Snowardou, causing her jaw to drop. I've scanned the creature's bones and age using my spiritual sense. It has truly only been alive for a year. How she has been able to evolve so fast, though, eludes my knowledge. Perhaps that is the potential of a blizzard sovereign beast, she whispered to herself, seemingly in deep thought. But she ultimately turned back to Ryuk. As much as she wanted to refuse it, she knew well that the growth of the creature must have something to do with the boy before her. Because if one thought the frost wyvern's growth was abnormal, then what about the boy who was only 17 years old yet could fight pseudo-eternal beings? A 17-year-old human boy at the pseudo-eternal stage? That was beyond abnormal. So somehow it must have had something to do with this boy. You said she was given to you by your uncle as a present for your coming of age, right? Elder Clion said, frowning as she looked at Isha. May I ask where your uncle is right now? She asked curiously, as Ryuk's expression dulled. He's gone, he whispered. Oh? I'm sorry for your loss, Queen Snowardou said, as Ryuk shrugged his shoulders. I'm used to his absence by now. What of your mother, though? Elder Selene asked, as Ryuk shook his head. I have no idea. All I've ever known is my uncle, he replied, and Elder Selene nodded. I have noticed something about your beast, Elder Selene started to say when Ryuk turned to her before interrupting. Isha. That's her name. Isha. I've noticed that Isha's power seems lacking for her cultivation level, she suddenly said, raising Ryuk's attention. I showed her some skills and asked her to perform them, but she's failing. All she can do is basic ice weapon manipulation and a single mundane frost breath. She has 0 ultimate attacks, and all her techniques are basic, or to be fair, trash. I guess that is to be expected when she's stuck with a human boy with 0 knowledge of frost wyverns or their abilities, she said, as Ryuk scoffed but didn't let the teasing get to him. Say what you want, but I'm pretty sure 90% of your frost wyverns would be wiped on the floor by her in a one-on-one battle, Ryuk said with a smug, confident smile. But she's not realizing her full potential, wouldn't you say? Frost wyverns have more than one attack. We are known for our ever-changing abilities and ultimate techniques. If all she can do is a frost breath, she becomes too predictable and hence weaker than she should be capable of. Like a person with hands being asked to use 2 fingers to hold a sword. He or she might still be an expert regardless, but then, compared to holding it with all 5 fingers, it is simply unfavorable. She convinced, as Ryuk nodded, but then couldn't help but notice she was getting at something, prompting him to ask, "What are you offering?" "I'm offering to train Isha in the ways of the frost wyvern, to show her what she is truly capable of." to nurture her until she becomes a true being, and hopefully, surpass my own level of power," Elder Selene explained to Ryuk. His eyebrows furrowed, but he remained silent as she continued. "And in exchange, when the battle with the Nulls is over, she will lead us home, to the planet of the Frost Wyvern." Ryuk shook his head. "I'm sure she's just like me. She has no idea who or where her parents are. How could she guide you to a place she herself doesn't even know?" "She knows," Elder Selene said firmly. "When a creature achieves the true being level, they are able to unclog their memories, which means they will be able to see every single scene that happened to them, right from the moment they came out of the womb until their current self, as clearly as one sees the lines on their palm. Once she reaches the true being stage, she'll know who her parents were, and she will know how she came to fall into your clutches. It will be easy for her to guide us then," she concluded. Ryuk's eyes flashed in shock. The words rang in his head. Once a being reaches the true being level, they are able to see their past. Right from birth? This had been Ryuk's goal all along, to see the past as it happened. To see who his enemies were, who his parents were, where his home was. If he could relive everything from his birth, then he would have all his answers. Every single one of them. So that's it? I just need the eternal stage, and I'll be able to get all of my answers. Ryuk mused to himself, a light flashing in his eyes. But then, he remembered Elder Selene's offer and asked, "Well, what happens if I say no?" Elder Selene shrugged her shoulders. "I'll order Snow to throw you out of our home," she said, as deadpan as ever. Ryuk couldn't agree more. These people, as hateful as they may seem, had kept him here for a week and even hospitalized him when he was at his weakest. And now that he had woken up, they were asking for something that wasn't really that detrimental to him and very important to them. If he refused, what other reason would they have for not throwing him out? And when he thought deeply about it, Ryuk realized he was probably the one benefiting the most from this deal. If Isha was nurtured to the eternal stage, it would be a big jump in power for Ryuk. And if she knew the way back home before he did, then he could return to Isha's world too. Whoever her parents were would definitely have a close connection to his own mother. It was the perfect scenario. In which case, he replied, "I'm fine with it. And I trust you won't do anything stupid," he added. "She can be back at my side as fast as you clicking your fingers. You might be stronger than I am, but if I manage to escape, then your death is already set in stone upon my return." His tone was as casual as ever, but a faint look of shock appeared on Elder Selene's face from his words. Ryuk slowly turned his gaze to Elder Snowwardow, who remained seated. "And she won't be the only one dying when that time comes. Trust me," he said, as a faint pressure undulated through the room. The icy ground beneath them began creaking. A monstrous aura erupted from Elder Selene, enough to shatter the entire place. The walls cracked, spreading in jagged lines as her silvery eyes flashed with an intense rune. "It's been a long time since I was last threatened," Elder Selene said as she rose from her seat, walking straight toward Ryuk, gazing down at him from where he sat. "Why are you tempting fate so hard, boy?" "It's Ryuk. Ryuk Null," he replied, his expression as deadpan as ever. Behind him, Isha rose, her blue gaze locked onto Elder Selene from above. "Ryuk Null. How peculiar," Queen Snowwardow, who had been sitting silently in the audience seat, muttered under her breath. Elder Selene's aura suddenly faded away, and a wide grin appeared on her lips, the first one Ryuk had ever seen. In fact, it was the first she had given in close to a decade. "Good then. From now on, you leave her to me, and you need my permission first for her to be by your side. I don't do things irregularly. I either train her or I don't. If you say no, it'll be going back on the deal. And even the devil knows I've held back my hand so much since this conversation. I don't think I can hold it back any longer," Elder Selene said before she turned away from Ryuk. Soon, a silvery white gate appeared. She walked toward it, stopping briefly and staring back at Isha, whose blue gaze slowly dimmed of the blue energy. "I'll be leaving for the Eclipsed Citadel, Isha. For now, you can stay with her and learn your ways. And don't forget, you can get to my side in a blink. Don't worry about her threat. Once you're back at my side, there's nothing we can't face. Even she will be subdued. Trust me, Ryuk said telepathically to Isha. A grin appeared on Isha's maw before she stretched out her claws and tapped Ryuk's head twice. Don't miss me too much, boy, Isha said. Ryuk couldn't help but roll his eyes. So much for getting emotional. I'll be off, Ryuk. And hopefully you haven't been fattened up by that golden girl when I get back to your side, Isha said as she followed after Elder Selene. Both of them stepped into the portal before disappearing. The silvery door undulated with a low howl before vanishing from the room, leaving behind only Ryuk and Queen Snowrdo. Her eyes flashing slightly as she noticed Ryuk's right arm, veins pulsing underneath his skin from how hard his hand was clenched, even though his expression was absolutely neutral. Guess he really didn't have that much choice in the end? And truly, she was right. And truly, Ryuk had not much choice in the matter. To leave Isha in the hands of a true being, someone he didn't really have any bond with, nor even liked, was unthinkable. Ryuk didn't like Elder Selene one bit. He didn't like her uncaring aura, nor her air of supremacy over him. At first, she saw him as an unimportant object she could get rid of for being in the way of her goals. If not for getting Isha back under his control, things would have likely gone south, and chances were he might have lost Isha or worse, his life. He didn't want Isha to go with her at all, but this case was a matter of no choice and deciding to follow the safest path. He didn't want Isha to go with her, but he also knew she wouldn't just tell him to get out for refusing her deal. Most likely, she would chase him down after, and a huge battle would erupt. Ryuk might be confident in his running skills, but the truth was, he had never faced anyone at the Eternal Stage before. He had no idea how much disparity there was, except that her shadow seemed to loom over him like an insurmountable mountain that would shatter all forms of resistance from him. All through the scene, all he had done was ignore that mountain and pretend as if he couldn't feel it. But truly, Ryuk felt it deep in his heart. His chances of surviving a battle with her were null, and his chances of escaping from her was too low. And what if she was just as fast as he was? Or if she held power over the void, just as he did? What other hidden cards did she have? Could he really have escaped with Isha while ensuring his safety? That way, Ryuk was limited to two choices. Let Isha go with her, whether he liked it or not, or say no and roll a dice on his and Isha's survival against a being who seemed like an insurmountable mountain. In the end, he had been forced to make a choice. The situation was never in his control. But he also knew he wasn't the only one who had no choice. Frost Wyverns were prideful and arrogant, and Elder Selene was definitely no exception. For the time and time again, her hands had been tied, and she had been forced to make a deal with Ryuk instead of outright killing him or forcing him down and subduing him. She itched to step on his face and blast him to depth of the earth, but she also had a risk. She could flaunt her power as she stepped on his face and crushed him to fulfill her ego, giving herself the respect she deserved. But what was it to risk? She risked missing her goal that has been harbored for so long a time. It had been 300 years, after all, that she had been trying to get back to the true haven, all in failure. She had searched both high and low, and in the end, she had eventually agreed to fate with no longer any choices. But now, the hope she thought was gone was before her. She could have crushed Ryuk and taken Isha by force, but if Isha ended up growing to the Eternality stage, then there was no doubt she would seek revenge. In the end, she would have been raising the very one who would end her before she even realized her dreams. And to forgo her dreams? She couldn't. After all, it had already been 3 centuries. For that reason, Elder Selene's hands had been tied too, forced to choose between her pride or her goals, and in the end, she had chosen to bite her lips and follow the logical path. In the end, this was a negotiation deal that neither of them were truly satisfied with. But they had no choice but to bite their lips and take the bullet. The choice has already been made, host. Unless the host considers going back on his word, then dwelling over it is useless. The system's words appeared as Ryuk took a deep inhale before he turned back to Queen Snowrdo, who was sipping her coffee, never having interrupted his train of thought. I'll be leaving, a week from now or sooner. The meeting will take place, he said before rising from his seat and heading out of the throne room. We'll be waiting then. Queen Snowrado's words rang out behind Ryuk, his back soon fading away from her view until he completely disappeared from the throne room. Then her spiritual sense picked him up in the sky over the Naga's plain, soon fading away. The next instant Ryuk was gone. Queen Snowrado's cup dropped to the ground, shattering into pieces as her hand gripped the edge of her throne. She took a deep breath, a line of sweat dripping from her face and racing down her cheek before a hand suddenly reached out, swiping away the sweat before it could reach her jaw. Elder Selene? Queen Snowrado watched the presence that appeared behind her throne, wiping away the sweat from her face with a smirk. Were you afraid, little Snow? Elder Selene asked in amusement, looking up at the sky. It seemed even now she could still see Ryuk blazing through the skies. I was afraid, Elder Selene, but not because of him. Queen Snowrado's voice was steady, but there was something beneath her words that made Elder Selene turn her gaze to her. Then what were you so afraid of? I was afraid, but for him. If even one of the tales Mother used to say about you was real, Elder Selene, the devastation. Not only would he have died, but a Blizzard Sovereign Frost Wyvern would have been lost too, and up to 30% of my Nagas would have been wiped out from that single attack of yours. So many lives lost in less than a split second? I was scared, really scared. Queen Snowrado said, her voice faintly trembling. Only she knew what would have happened if the conversation had gone wrong. Only she knew who this creature beside her was. She was a walking apocalypse, one that couldn't be held back unless the strongest of the End Earth decided to rise from slumber and stop her. And even then, the lives that would be lost. You're just like your mother, little Snow, always so afraid for the people. You know she would be proud, Snow. She would. Verily, she would. The chilling wind blew across the open top of one of the castle's high grounds, just a few meters away from the tower's towering tip. With eyes locked into the distance, there stood a lady of unrivaled beauty, dressed in a flowing golden gown that seemed to flash an otherworldly divine light under the silhouette of the moon. Her long golden hair cascaded down her head like a waterfall, her shadow sprawling all over the walls until it covered the castle. Golden eyes stared calmly into the distant eclipse, and the palm of her hand held onto each other. If one looked at those golden gems, they would barely notice the worry flashing in them. The sound of footsteps suddenly rang out through the top of the castle, and the one revealed was none other than a silver-haired fallen lady with two huge wings, dressed in knight's armor, her sword strapped to her side. My future highness! Her words rang out as the golden-haired beauty turned her head slightly sideways, to the sight of the fallen knight on one knee, her hand firmly across her chest. Rise up, Chrysalis, and I've told you many times not to bother with that when we're alone. Morgaine's voice echoed through the high top as Chrysalis rose up, a small smile appearing on the side of her lips, her eyes shining with familiarity. It was clear this wasn't their first meeting, nor the discussion of this topic. I'm afraid that's required of me as an eternal guard. But I've noticed you've been out too far at night, my lady, and the trainings are getting harder with every fading moon silhouette, and they happen very early too. I'm afraid you need to retreat to your chambers early in order to be prepared for them lest you fall prey to crippling fatigue, my lady. Chrysalis tried to convince her as Morgaine stared at the night sky, before she eventually nodded her head. I understand you, Chrysalis. Just 10 more minutes with the breeze, and I'll go rest. Morgaine said as Chrysalis' eyes flashed in relief before she nodded her head. Well then, I'll be leaving you to your peace, my lady, she said before the sound of retreating footsteps reached Morgaine's ears. After they were long gone, she sighed a bit, her palms slipping for her arms to wrap into each other, faintly brushing against her skin. Her eyes looked lonely at the night sky, as if waiting for something to appear on the horizon. But it's been days now, and no matter how she stared, it all remained like it was. Time passed pretty quickly, and soon it was a bit more than 30 minutes. Morgaine's look stayed at the sky for a long while before she eventually turned her gaze away. Seems like it won't be today, she mused with disappointment before she turned behind her, her gaze faintly brushing against the corner of the railing as she moved to the door, only for her to pause in shock as she returned her gaze back to the railing corner. And standing there, seemingly melding with the darkness, even though clad in white, was a figure who stared at her, amusement and a bit of a smile on his face. "Have I made you worried again, my lady?" His voice was like jolts of electricity that rang down her spine, yet a smile of relief on her face, and in the next instant, the air slightly rustled, as Morgaine raised her head to find him just inches away from her, his hands slowly wrapping around her waist as he brought her closer to his chest. "I'm sorry, Morgaine," he whispered into her ear, and a smile appeared on Morgaine's face. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into his embrace. "I'm not offended, Ryuk. Just needlessly worried," she mused as Ryuk smiled. "It's a source of pride to have the future queen of the Fallens worried about me." "Well, what will it be for the current queen to be worried then?" A third voice resounded through the top as Ryuk's eyes flashed, and he slowly released Morgaine from his embrace before he turned his gaze up into the sky where a figure slowly descended, clad in a long silvery robe with the same golden hair flailing down her face. She was a beauty beyond even that of Morgaine, for she was not only beautiful but radiated an arcane power with every single one of her movements, the entire world seemingly dancing along with her and even the air seemingly submitting itself under her grasp. And as she landed on the ground, thump, Ryuk's knee hit the ground, slamming down with a faint thump, his head bowed with his hand over his chest. "My humble greeting to the half-fallen one," he said, but he never spent a second on the same position before he was raised up to his feet. "One who has my daughter's heart need not royal courtesies," the half-fallen one said, resulting in a red hue appearing on Morgaine's face, and Ryuk could only smile as he felt the hands that held his cheeks gently. Abruptly, a feeling of warmth washed over his body, but he made no move to stop it from fully meandering through him before it returned back to the half-fallen one's grasp, and she finally released her touch. "Seems like the Nagas really treated you well. It's amazing to see you standing after that amount of destruction that came upon you just a week ago," the half-fallen one said as Ryuk's eyes flashed. "I never knew it had spread so fast," he said, heaving a bit. Who could have guessed the news of his battle with the Null Wanderers and his injuries had already spread to even the Fallens? And all of this happened while he was in slumber. Spreading is the basic reward that is awarded to brave acts like yours. Your actions saved the lives of thousands, potentially millions, as no one in the beginning of the battle could have stopped the Null's Wanderers, cementing their eventual demise, and they would have definitely spread to the other cities, spreading chaos before they are stopped. Morgaine said to Ryuk, who could only scratch the back of his head. And to be fair, it was the first he remembered receiving a praise from her, leaving him no way to handle it from experience. "But I have a personal reward though," the half-fallen one said, as she called Ryuk and Morgaine to follow her, and all three soon descended down the top of the building, heading down. It reminded me of Mad White's dining room, the large view before me, except instead of everything being golden, it was silvery white instead. Everything down to the color of the dishes on the table, and even the utensils placed by the side. She sat at the lead, a fork and knife in hand, and I sat to the side, separated from Morgaine by the table in front. The gift she had claimed to reward me with was actually a dinner after all. A/N. How do you like Ryuk's first point of view? Haha. Just experimenting. And to Morgaine, it truly was nothing but an ordinary dinner set. But when Ryuk looked at each and every object on the table, his eyes softened with delight and gratefulness. For he could see that everything in the room had a golden aura, wisps weaving around them, dancing along their edges. And it was none other than the golden aura of the half-fallen one. It revealed that this entire setup had been done by her, even the dishes. And while Ryuk had no idea how she had been able to guess his arrival and still ensure the dishes were hot enough when he arrived, he knew well that every single thing here had been done by her. One had to know there were maids, every inch of the castle had them, who could have done this, but she had done it herself with her own hands. And she was the half-fallen one. In this time when the Null's War had been declared, she was probably one of the busiest individuals that existed right now, most likely under monumental pressure. Yet, even during this time, she could take some time off to make a dinner possible, just for him. It was heartwarming. "Thank you," Ryuk mused under his breath as the half-fallen one's eyes flashed before she smiled in response. For one, she had never thought he would be able to see the faint aura that still hung around the objects by which he must have been able to tell. She might have left her aura splashes on everything she touched, but that shouldn't be something an ordinary cultivator could see or even notice. For him to do so gave a hint to his power, and that had always been something she could never wrap her head around. When he had appeared before her, he was but a little kid, with an aura that showed he had just started his cultivation a few hours ago. Yet now, a little more than 2 years later, he was sitting before her with a strength that even she couldn't just ignore like it was nothing. Such incredibly fast growth was beyond puzzling, and deep in the half-fallen one's heart, she was proud, not only of him but of herself, because she knew well that she had been a major determinant of his strength. The young man before her had stemmed from her decision to believe in him when she could have shrugged her shoulders. And now, that choice to uphold justice and honesty and to honor the card which he had possessed mysteriously, even if it was partly to get back another very talented genius of her race, had been worth it in the end. But still, there was something worrying about him, and it was really simple. How had he grown so fast? Could a human, a race known for its poor cultivation potential, really have not only grown this strong but this fast? Was he even what he seemed? Just a human boy? What had changed, or had nothing ever changed? Was this just how he had always been, and she was too blind to see it? I'm guessing the pressure must be monumental right now. Being the half-fallen one, with the Null's War finally being revealed to the world, and their unusualness compared to the last. How you've been able to keep the enclosed citadel so peaceful in these hard times, I can only wonder. Ryuk's question resounded through the room when he felt it awkwardly fall silent, and he decided to be the one to speak first. It's not much of a problem, to be honest. Only the ultimate matter, capable of causing very devastating amounts of destruction to the Fallens, are brought to me as the Queen. I don't have to worry about the other things. We Fallen have official staff that are put in place for that, the half-fallen one said with a shrug, and Ryuk couldn't help but nod his head. He had truly been able to sense that the half-fallen one was never revealed, even though the leaders that appeared on the screen previously had seemed like the Fallen. If the half-fallen one was to lead the Fallen, then wasn't she supposed to be appearing on the leader holographics instead? That must have meant she was probably not responsible for such. But the Null's strange appearance is truly worrying. 3 Null Wanderers appearing only at the second invasion? That is beyond abnormal. It means I might have to get to work sooner than I expected. Good for me, though. I already have a brilliant someone who will be in my position soon. The half-fallen one flashed a chuckle at Morgane, who rolled her eyes, drawing a giggle from the half-fallen one as she watched one of her cheeks sticking out because of how much was pressed into them. And then maybe, I'll get the chance to perform one very courageous act before I'll be allowed to retire and become a grandmother, she teased. Bang! The dishes on the table jumped up by a few centimeters as Morgane slammed her hands on the table, almost spitting out all she had just tried swallowing, forcing them down with all her power before she turned to the half-fallen one, who had her taunting smirk. "M.O.M." Morgane said with an embarrassed sheen on her face, but the half-fallen one only winked slyly at her. "TCH, maybe in your dreams. He's still underage for Fallen's sake." She shot back with a loud huff before resuming stuffing her mouth, but the half-fallen one's eyes flickered with surprise as she turned to Ryuk and asked, "What age are you, Ryuk?" 17. 17? But it's been more than 2 years. And if I remember correctly, you were 16 when we first met, the half-fallen one said. Ryuk nodded, and he quickly summarized the trial to her, to which her eyes flashed, and she nodded. "Oh, so it was like that? Sounds right. 17 and at the pseudo-eternal stage? That's quite talented, don't you think, Morgane?" The half-fallen one said as Morgane swallowed down her stuffed cheek before nodding. "Yes, it is. I recently reached the peak of the Dominion stage, and I was so proud. But then, he came and was already at the Cataclysm stage. I was so happy, Morgaine said as she grumpily stuffed another huge amount into her cheeks, and Ryuk could only roll his eyes shamelessly. I'm curious, Ryuk, the half-fallen one suddenly said, drawing Ryuk's attention. Yes. Why did you join the war in the first place? You weren't being forced, were you? You could have sat out of it, but you chose to fight. Why? She asked, looking at him as Ryuk shrugged his shoulders, swallowing down a morsel. The portal was opening up right above Porion City, which held 60% of humanity's population, and the 10 families never agreed to fight for humanity in the first place. I never even thought they would show up, so I knew we humans needed as much strength as possible. A power level at the pseudo-eternal stage will no doubt be a great help, won't it? Ryuk replied as the half-fallen one nodded in understanding. So now that the calamity has passed for the humans, will you still be fighting in the next upcoming Null War? She asked him as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed for a while. He truly had never thought of the question. He had been given no choice but to fight during the previous war because he was fighting for humanity. But the second war definitely wouldn't open right above Porion City, meaning the humans wouldn't be in danger of extinction this time. So then, did he still need to join? If I'm not stuck in slumber or rendered immobile in one way or the other, then I'll be fighting still, Ryuk said, drawing the gaze of both Morgaine and the half-fallen one. It's no longer about the humans winning the war now or fighting for humanity. The 10 families had come together and lost some of their soldiers, something they could have avoided if they had left humanity to its doom, although it was based on an agreed deal. It showed me this is beyond just a war anymore. If we hope to win and stop Endearth from invasion, then we need to fight as one, and the 10 families had fought for us humans. If tomorrow the portal opens up right above their sky, then I'll be by their side too. It's a simple law of reciprocation, he replied, as the half-fallen one's eyes flashed before she nodded. That makes sense, the half-fallen one said, but Morgaine asked. The third Null War will probably be harder than the previous one, won't it? She asked, as the half-fallen one nodded her head. It would be safer if we believe it will. Then, are you sure you still want to join, Ryuk? Morgaine asked as Ryuk turned to her. I mean, the previous one rendered you half-destroyed, and the next one will be harder. Do you think it'll be worth it? Morgaine said, as the half-fallen one nodded. That is true, Ryuk. To head into war, you go with the belief of being ready to take a life. But if you choose to take one's life, you must be ready to forfeit yours as well. Are you really sure you're ready to forfeit your life? The half-fallen one asked as Ryuk's eyes narrowed before words appeared in his head. Ready to kill or be killed? Silence covered the dining room for a while as Ryuk went deep into thought, his head flashing with memories as he thought about the answer. Truly was a difficult question. For truly, Ryuk had no fear of battle. A war? A fight? To take a life? He didn't really care much about all that. But one who headed into a fight with the aim of killing ought to be ready for his own death too. Was he, Ryuk, truly ready for his death? That was something that he couldn't say he was unafraid of. If anything, death was the thing he was most afraid of. I'm not afraid of war. When I stand before an army of nulls, I don't feel fear at all, and when I strike, I don't hold back. I'm ready to kill. But have I made peace with my own death? I'm afraid I've not. I hope I could be one of those warriors that could wade into the field of battle not at all afraid of their fates. But unfortunately, that's not me. I feel no fear for war, but my fear of death is beyond me. Then you shouldn't go to war, don't you think? Morgaine said as Ryuk gently shook his head. The fear of death doesn't stop me or hold my hands, nor have I read a law where it says only those unafraid of death should head to war. I fight regardless, and I never lose, Ryuk said, a faint amused smirk appearing on the lips of the half-fallen one. You know, I know many with such confidence, but most of them get buried in the graveyard of swords. All get killed in the end, she said with an emotionless gaze, as Ryuk shrugged his shoulders before muttering. They're not me. Words that instantly captured the hearing of the half-fallen one. That reminds me, How's Morgaine's queen training going? Ryuk asked with a curious smile as the half-fallen one's face lit up and Morgaine furrowed her eyebrows instead. She's doing pretty well, according to the Throne Lords. But of course, she pales in comparison to me in every aspect of the training. Comparing us might even be an overkill. The half-fallen one said as she flashed Morgaine a taunting smirk, to which she snorted. You're just a monster, she taunted back with a smirk. And you're my daughter. The half-fallen one dished back with the same smirk as Morgaine humphed before diving into her food, and Ryuk could only shrug helplessly. Silence lingered at the table for a long moment before Ryuk suddenly felt a disturbance in his pet space. His eyebrows furrowed, something the half-fallen one didn't fail to notice, and she couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" "Just a second." Ryuk closed his eyes, sensing the disturbance for a while before reopening them. A moment later, a creature mysteriously appeared on Ryuk's shoulder, drawing a raised eyebrow from the half-fallen one. Meow! Void's soft cry echoed through the room as Ryuk raised a brow, looking at the creature before a slight surprised gasp left his lips. Congratulations! Host's pet, Void, has successfully undergone a basic evolution. Evolution. Void kitten? A void cat. New skills have been awakened. Did it get smaller? Morgaine's voice carried a doubtful tone, her brow raised as Ryuk's eyes also furrowed. Previously, Void had grown to the size of a small puppy, but now it had shrunk considerably, becoming so tiny that it could fit in Ryuk's palm and rested comfortably on his shoulder. Is that a void cat? The half-fallen one gasped in shock, golden aura gushing out from her hair. Both Ryuk and Morgaine witnessed her losing control for a minute. That only happens when a person's shock is so immense that they lose control of their energy, resulting in it flaring around, even though the half-fallen one managed to suppress it in less than a second. Yes, it's a new pet of mine. Name's Void, Ryuk introduced, as the half-fallen one silently kept her probing gaze on Void for almost 10 seconds straight before she sat back upright, shaking her head slightly. Then, an amused smirk appeared on her face. I'm pretty sure that prideful bastard will be interested in seeing him, the half-fallen one said with a hint of laughter. And who's that? Morgaine asked as the half-fallen one took a sip of her liquid before replying. Randu, the guardian creature of the Shadow Walkers. He's a strong and prideful bastard, an old beast that used to call itself the only one and supreme in the world. And all of his pride comes from the fact that he's the only void cat on Endearth, and the entire universe, he says. There was, the half-fallen one said, as Ryuk's eyes flashed and even Void's whiskers twitched repeatedly, its tail flickering and slithering like a shadow. I never thought there was another void cat. But then, there are frost wyverns in this world too, even though I thought Isha was the only one. So, I'm not that surprised. Ryuk mused with a shrug as Morgaine nodded before the half-fallen one asked. I've seen that frost wyvern of yours on the TV from the news sent by the Nagas. If I remember correctly, she was an ice python the last time I saw her. Can I see her again, for real now? The half-fallen one asked, but Ryuk shook his head. I'm afraid that's impossible. She's with the Nagas. Their eternal stage frost wyvern has taken a liking to her. Selene? The half-fallen one asked, and Ryuk turned his gaze toward her. You know her? Yes, she's an old friend, she replied, as Ryuk's eyes flashed and he nodded his head. If Selene has taken an interest in your pet, then I'd have to say she is quite lucky. Selene's interest is not easily piqued. She's the type that considers everything beneath her, after all. Do you think Isha will be safe with her? Ryuk asked, unable to hold himself back as the half-fallen one nodded confidently. She would be if Selene gave you her word. She rarely does and therefore values them. If she told you Isha would be safe, then she will keep her promise. If she didn't, then your pet's fate is at her whim, the half-fallen one said, as Ryuk exhaled relaxedly. It seemed that even though Selene appeared to be an arrogant and rude bitch, she was at least known for valuing her word. Does it need its little plate? Morgaine asked Ryuk with a chuckle, and Ryuk shrugged. Void soon stretched out its large paw into Ryuk's own dish and removed a large piece of meat, its maw opening up. It brimmed with energy as Void swallowed all of it, despite the meat being bigger than its size. Yet, it devoured it with such ease before eagerly reaching for the next piece. Ryuk didn't mind it eating together with him and simply continued his meal without any problem. A sight that drew the raised eyebrows of both Morgaine and the half-fallen one, who weren't used to having a beast eat with them. "You really are something else," Morgaine muttered. "You know, you can bring the rest of your pets out. I don't mind mutated beasts at all," the half-fallen one said, but Ryuk shook his head. "He only has Isha and Void," Morgaine replied, drawing the attention of the half-fallen one. "Just two?" she asked, and Morgaine nodded. "But why?" she pressed, turning to Ryuk. "Why? The average tamer on Endearth has at least 5 to 7 beasts. Grand Tamers, which are tamers at the constellation stage, have at least 20 beasts under their control. You have surpassed the Cataclysm stage level of power, which means you could be well referred to as a true Grand Master. Yet you only have 2 beasts?" the half-fallen one asked, as Ryuk's eyes flashed with an amused light. "He probably doesn't even know it," Morgaine whispered, chuckling as he rolled his eyes. Truly, he had about 9 or 10 slots left open for contracting beasts, but then, Ryuk didn't just contract beasts randomly. "Is it because you can't find more beasts? I can get you more beasts to contract if you want," the half-fallen one offered, and Ryuk thought about it briefly before shaking his head. "Isha and Void are currently all I need for now. One more and I might not be able to keep them very well under control," he said, as the half-fallen one's gaze furrowed. "Even Dominion stage beast tamers have 8 to 10 beasts under their control, and they have no problem with it. How could he have 2 and say he can't handle more? If your participation in the Third Null War is finalized, then tell me, Ryuk. Until then, what do you plan to do?" the half-fallen asked curiously, as Ryuk stared at Void for some time, his eyes flashing with new ideas, but he pushed them down as he cleared his head and responded. "I've previously come to spend some company with Morgaine. The earlier preparations for the Second War had caused limited contact, and I thought after its end, I could make it up by coming to the castle," Ryuk said, drawing Morgaine's gaze from her dish as a pink blush appeared on her cheeks, and the half-fallen nudged her shoulder with her elbow. "But she seems really busy with her training right now." "Yes, but Morgaine replied before Ryuk cut her off. "Which is very necessary and a good thing," he said. "Endearth doesn't smell peace now, Morgaine. It reeks of danger from every corner. You take your training seriously, you grow stronger, and that improves not only the future of the Fallens who you'll be ruling soon, but you yourself too." "Teach?" Morgaine clicked her tongue in dissatisfaction, but had no choice but to swallow down another huge morsel in her cheeks, stuffing them up until they formed balloons. "And to be fair, I also need to take my training seriously too. I have a lot of things to improve on before the next Null War begins. I'm even thinking of visiting the Shadow Walkers," he announced, as the half-fallen one's eyebrows curved together, her face turning to look at Void before it faintly settled. "Not sure if they'll welcome you much warmly. The Void Walkers don't relate to the other races and suck at communication skills," the half-fallen one said. "Unless, of course, you're one with the half-fallen one's daughter's heart," she teased in the end, resulting in another loud call from Morgaine and the half-fallen one's teasing giggle. "Here," she suddenly called to Ryuk, a dark card that radiated bits of shadow sparking her gasp as it flew toward Ryuk, who grabbed it with his hands, staring at the bizarre shadow-like rune symbol drawn on the card. "That is just like the authority card you gave to me when we first met, except belonging to the Shadow Walkers instead. So with this, I get to have a free wish of mine answered by the Shadow Walkers?" Ryuk asked, as the half-fallen one paused in thought but then shook her head. "Not exactly, but you'll be allowed to meet one of their high-ranking shadows and be given an audience. Although, there is no guarantee that they'll accept any request of yours, unlike our authority card. Still a good thing regardless. Like this, I won't be wandering aimlessly if I ever pay a visit at least," he said to himself, as he turned to the half-fallen one and uttered, "Thank you," to which she casually waved off. Silence followed after lengthily, as they all quietly ate their dinner, and in a little more than 30 minutes they were all done. But then, as they rose to leave, the half-fallen one gestured to Ryuk. "If you don't mind, Morgaine, can I have your sweetheart for the night?" The half-fallen one suddenly said then. The wine came gushing out of Morgaine's nose, pouring toward Ryuk, about to wet him up, only to pause in the air before behind and land to the ground. A telekinetic barrier? The half-fallen one thought in surprise. Cough, cough, cough. Morgaine coughed out her lungs from the sudden release in her throat. The words had choked her so much she had spat out the wine from shock. "Mom, have you lost it?" Morgaine screamed loudly as the half-fallen one laughed wickedly. "You dumb girl. I'm just saying I want a private discussion with him? Teeth. Such dark mind at such young age too." She muttered with an eye roll as Morgaine scoffed. It seems like she had fallen for her tricks once more. "And you do know the elders won't allow you to not to train for whatever reasons you may have. Go to sleep," she said to her before a golden vortex appeared to the side, and she slowly walked in with Ryuk behind her. Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed at the suddenness, but he only shrugged it off, giving Morgaine one last wave. But then he noticed her eyes were lost, staring at the gate as if trying to jog up the memories of what they were. But then, a pull took at Ryuk as he got closer to the gate, dragging him inside it before he could ask her what was wrong. The world spun for a couple of moments, the same feeling of being thrown into space, except this time in a roundabout manner, and soon, Ryuk felt the world harden beneath his feet, the sound of his own feet touching the ground grounding him, and he looked around. But his eyes flashed in shock when he looked at what was before him. It was an endless expanse of a golden world that seemed to continue into the distance for all of eternity. But around him were a total of 5 altars rising from the ground in a pentagon shape, and on top of these 5 altars were beings with massive golden wings. They were fallens, yet bore distinct resemblances from other fallens due to their 4 wings instead of the usual 2. And instead of golden or silvery wings, they all had pitch-black wings that radiated an incredible amount of dark shadow-like energy. One of them sitting on the altar was a person Ryuk recognized, as the name unconsciously appeared in his head.
Sir Kiran?
Yes, it was Sir Kiran, the man who had been tasked with bringing the Ultimate 10 Geniuses to the Ascension Academy from the Fallen training grounds. The one who had faced the Bat Horde on their way. Ryuk refocused his gaze above him and found the half-fallen before on a throne that floated in the sky, radiating an incredible amount of dense energy that formed some sort of golden barrier covering the entire golden expanse. "If you don't mind me asking, why are we here with these fallens?" Ryuk asked, but then the notification flashed before his gaze. "Warning! Warning! 5 beings at the pseudo-eternal stage have been discovered along with a being at the eternal stage. Malicious intent detected." "What? Pseudo-eternals? They are all at pseudo-eternal stage?" Ryuk wondered in shock as he passed his gaze through each and every one of the fallens before him. Somehow, he couldn't sense even the most minute aura on each of them. It was like they weren't even existing at all, with no telltale signs of cultivation on them. Yet their mere standing was enough to make his hair stand on end. "Why are we here, you ask, Ryuk?" The half-fallen one's voice resounded from above Ryuk as he raised his head up, watching her take a seat on her throne. He noticed as all bits of warmth seemed to fade away from the half-fallen one's face, replaced by a biting gaze of coldness that seemed to lack any sort of emotion at all towards him. It was like he didn't even exist before those golden eyes that stared at him. A marveling change that shook Ryuk's heart. "My reason for you being here is simple, Ryuk. To erase my doubt," she said, as Ryuk raised an eyebrow. "Your doubt. There is something about you unsettling to me, Ryuk. Something that is not just right. You grew too fast for any race that exists on Endearth. When we met, you had barely stepped foot on the first stairs of cultivation, and now just 3 years later, you're already close to the peak steps. Not even our most mighty genius was capable of such speed. Good thing for you then, huh? Ryuk said with a smile, but the next few words knocked him off his perch. This has created doubt in my mind. Doubt in who you truly are. Doubt in what you truly are. And today, I have come to erase my doubts about you. The half-fallen one explained lightly as Ryuk's eyebrows curled up. Have I offended her before somehow? Or does she not support me and Morgaine's relationship? He thought before his eyebrows steeled, and he muttered, You know you're lost one. If you don't want me with your daughter, you could simply say it, and I would have given her space. This, on the other hand, looks like a pretty cheap way to get back at me. Don't you all agree? Ryuk said, as the half-fallen one's eyes flashed with piercing godlike might. It seemed like those words had broken through the facade, and even some of the dark fallen on the altar had their eyes flashing to the half-fallen one's expression. Morgaine is just a part of why I need to truly know who you are. She's young and blinded with love to see your abnormality, but not me. And when has it been wrong for a daughter to know well the identity of her lover? If anything, this is just one of my responsibilities as a mother, she said, as Ryuk scoffed. I understand that all right. If I was a mother, I'd also be interested in knowing the identity of my daughter's lover. But is setting a total of 5 pseudo-eternal beings to gang up on him and watching from a throne in the sky as they trash me up really what you will refer to as understanding me? Really? Of all ways to understand me, unleashing your elders against me after I just had a life-death battle and just recovered really the best idea you could come up with? You have not earned the ability to talk back my decisions. The half-fallen once shot back. I saved the lives of your fallens. I saved your armies from destruction. I saved your daughter's life when she could have had her head crushed under the death grasps of a hobgoblin king. Ryuk shouted in anger. All of what I did. And yet, you still don't know who I am? You doubt if I'm on your side still? Oh, I grew too fast. Too fast and ended up saving your armies? Too fast and fighting alongside with you? Too fast and preparing for the next war against the Nulls? Too fast and standing behind Endearth as an unshakable pillar of support? Oh, I grew too fast, and now I've birthed doubt in your mind. Ryuk shouted furiously, as the half-fallen one's eyes flashed. But then, the emotions in them were wiped out just as fast as she settled calmly on her throne. My choices are final. You fight my guardians, and when your life flashes before your eyes, you will reveal to me what you truly are, she said, closing her eyes and raising her hand up to command the fallen soldiers. But then, you're a coward. Ryuk followed straight after as the half-fallen one jerked her eyes open. What did you just call me, kid? You're a coward. Every one of you here is, he said, as disbelief flashed in the eyes of the elders. You have no doubts in your mind. No, you don't. You're all just afraid. A kid that was barely at the origin stage when you met him, now just a single step lesser than you 2 years later, after you all spent centuries just to reach where you are. That's what has made you all afraid. You're afraid that if I am left for 2 or 3 more years, I would grow too strong, far beyond your grasps. I could be a threat, no? And now that Morgaine is the princess and will soon be chosen as the queen, making me the king of the Fallens, you don't actually want the king, who is nothing but a human, to be uncontrollable, do you? You don't want him to be too strong to escape beyond your influence. Or you don't even want a king at all? After all, the Fallens only have a queen, not a king, right? That is what you're afraid of. And what does that make you, if not a coward? Kaboom! A powerful aura blasted out, not from the half-fallen one, but from the elders who were seated on the altars, as a monumental pressure slammed down forth, blasting onto Ryuk and crumbling the ground beneath his feet. Yet, his knees refused to bulge, instead his legs digging deeper into the ground, his eyes clashing firmly with that of the half-fallen one. You're in the presence of the devilish half-fallen one. Watch your tongue, low-life! The roar blasted out from the lips of one of the elders as Ryuk turned his head up and laughed out loud. Presence of cowards, and you demand respect? TCH. Ignorant bastard. Tell me, half-fallen one. Do you think if these fools fight me, then you'll be able to know whatever I am? That all my secrets will be revealed? Or that what I am will be exposed? The instant Ryuk's words were completed, a sword slipped into the hands of one of the elders, one that reached 3 meters in pure length, rippling with massive dark flames, and then he slashed out thunderously, time and space seemingly being sliced away. Boom! The air flapped with intensity as Ryuk's hair flailed loudly around his head. Yet he stared at the sword with drooping eyes, hands in both pockets, and then it slashed through completely, ripping his entire body apart into clear two. The dust followed after, covering the scene. But then it soon dispersed. Gasps of shock left the lips of the elders as they looked to the ground. But they couldn't find Ryuk. Instead, an unending slash mark that was rapidly healing itself formed the only sign he had once been there on the floor. In the next instant, one of the elders, Sir Kirin, raised his narrowed eyes up into the air, where he could see Ryuk's figure standing a few meters away from the half-fallen one. But now there was a new figure, a bizarre dark cat sitting on Ryuk's shoulder. Ryuk's crimson-blue eyes stared at the half-fallen one before he spoke out. I cannot be held under control by force. You might deceive yourself that you only want to know who or what I am, but your choice of that tears at my pride as a person. And now, you have lost my respect? He spoke calmly and softly, absolutely devoid of anger. Yet the words sent the heart of the half-fallen clenching within her as the feelings descended into her. The feeling of having something valuable. For your acts of goodwill that you have done me in the past till now, I will repay by sparing yours and their lives. My last bit of honor towards you. Goodbye, Fallen, Ryuk said as he turned his back to her. And in the next instant, a gigantic dark vortex materialized before Ryuk as he calmly walked towards it. But the half-fallen's voice rang. You won't be able to leave here without my will. Your fate has been sealed ever since I had set up the golden blockade veil on this realm, she completed. Yet watched as Ryuk's void vortex held up, and slowly he stepped into it before his back faded in. His last words rang clearly through the world. When next we meet, we will either be strangers or enemies, never friends. He left. But how? How was he able to ignore the effect of the golden blockade veil? An elder said in uproar as they watched the vortex close up and Ryuk nowhere to be found. They had been very confident of the domain skill set up by the half-fallen one, and had thought he would have been ruthlessly sent flying to the ground by the domain laws. But he was gone, truly gone. He had set up a vortex right before he even stepped foot into the realm. An already open vortex won't be closed by the golden blockade veil. That means he must have been suspicious that something was wrong the instant he stepped into the portal that led him here. Sir Kirin's voice rang out from behind the half-fallen one's throne as they both looked at the place where Ryuk had left. Kriak! The sound of teeth crashing against each other as the half-fallen one's teeth clanked in anger. Her reaction silenced everyone in the realm. Eventually, she calmed herself down. He had ended up escaping because of my overconfidence. He had outsmarted me in the end, she thought to herself. She had thought just like everyone, the golden blockade veil would have stopped his teleportation and he had been confined in it, and that had given Ryuk all he needed to escape without any headache. She had thought she had earned his trust, but Ryuk had already set up a vortex before they even left the dinner at all. That must mean he never really fully trusted her at all, or why would he have set up an escape means before he even saw where they were going? And while she had thought he would have tried to show off his strength and take her challenge, he had seen the facade behind her actions. In truth, all she wanted to prove was to show her strength and make him believe they had control over his life and death. She might not care much for him as Morgaine's lover as he was perfect in everything she could ask for. Potential, talents, handsomeness, manners. He had it all. But she wanted the throne of the fallen to be under their control, and she had resorted to the only way she had known to earn control of someone. She had chosen force. But he was beyond that, and he had enough pride in his heart to find it an insult. And now he had left, their ties ripped apart. Tell me, Kirin, The half-fallen one called to Sir Kieran, who was behind her, with a sigh. Was my decision wrong? No, my lost one. Sir Kieran called without the slightest of doubt as the half-fallen one raised her head to him, surprise in her eyes. Even in her heart, she had felt her decision had been wrong, and even the gaze of the elders below had proved that. But Kieran, the coldest of them, had believed she was right? Why is it, Kieran? You acted like a queen would, my lost one. You were worried for who the authority of controlling the fallen would be. What type of a person he would be. And you wanted to test that out. If he ends up being the king and he is nothing but evil, he would have ruined the lives of us fallen, and Morgaine wouldn't be able to stop him, having been blinded for her love of him. And ignoring that, my lost one, you are right to want to test him out. Because now I see it clearly, Sir Kieran said, a dark runic line appearing in his eyes as he looked at where Ryuk had left before he turned back to the half-fallen. He is not a human, Sir Kieran said as a golden aura burst out of the half-fallen's body, the space erupting into nothing, and even the elder's eyes flashed in shock. Slowly, the half-fallen one rose up from her throne as the elder's knees were instantly smashing into the ground, and Kieran lowered his legs only for his shoulder to be picked up as the half-fallen one asked once more. What do you mean, Kieran? He's like me, your lost one. His soul is dark like mine, and has lost its spark. What type of evil? The half-fallen one asked. The only evil that comes close is the null type. Impossible. Void Vortex ability deactivated. Host has activated Void Vortex for 10 minutes straight. -170 mana points. Secret quests completed. Quest: escape the bombardments of the fallen powerhouse. Rewards. The system notification flashed, but Ryuk closed it off as his gaze looked at the area before him. I'm not safe yet. Right now, he was in some sort of dark alleyway, and raising up his head, he could see the cold moon in the sky that shone on his face, his eyes flashing at the sight. And then, he lowered himself to the ground before. Boom! The ground shook a bit as he shot into the sky like a bullet, soon appearing above the building, and then he landed on it. The birds on it flapped their wings and flew off as he made his way to the edge, his eyes overlooking the city before him. Seems like I was able to escape, he mused to himself, exhaling in relief. When Ryuk had been suddenly asked for a personal meeting with the half-fallen one, he had seen she had made it too fast for him to say a yes or no, but he had shrugged it off due to his belief in her. But when he noticed Morgaine's furrowed eyebrows, he had felt his skin tingling, a natural sign of his body revealing to him that there was danger. And just in case, he had decided to activate Void Vortex before he stepped in fully, just a preventive measure to enable himself to get out anytime. And that action had saved him from embarrassment, as he had been able to easily use it when he needed it, getting himself out of the place in a blink. But keeping the Void Vortex ability active for so long had caused him to be unable to control the location of where he would stop by. But now, he could see there was a highway before him, revealing he must be out of the Eclipse Citadel, but no doubt still in Grade B. Oh! A cold release of air left Ryuk's lips as his gaze locked into the distant flying cars on the street, his eyes staring at them blitzing by, yet his gaze lost in the motion of it all. Was it sadness? Anger? Or perhaps disappointment? Ryuk couldn't exactly tell. Just that his mood had turned bad in seemingly less than an hour. From the feeling of thinking he belonged, to the same feeling that he was forever alone. Things had switched up pretty fast. Perhaps I should have just fought? The thought flew across his mind as he gazed listlessly at the beelining cars below. But then the notification flashed. No, host. Fighting 5 pseudo-eternal beings would have led me to revealing all your cards, including the nanobody. And before an eternal one, she would most likely have been able to see through host's true person in a blink. Notwithstanding that her aim had been to place the host under some sort of authoritative control. Such a person has no contribution for host's emotional, social, or physical growth. Cutting her off was right. The system notification flashed as Ryuk exhaled. That was at least comforting to hear. But what about her? What about Morgaine? The thought flashed in Ryuk's head. What excuse would the half-fallen one have given her for my absence? How would things ever work out if the ties between her mother and I don't work out? And there's no saying if the Fallens are after my back now or not. Somehow, I feel like she's not the one to give up so easily. Neither do I have the power to confront her. For now, I can only run. Unfortunately, that's all I can do for now. He mused to himself as he looked at his palms, at the Apex watch he wore on his hands, and he pulled it off his wrist, looking at it and moving to Morgane's message panel to leave a message. But then, the notification flashed. Tracking control has been noticed from the Apex watch. Scanning for host's location has begun. Scanning will be completed in 5, 4, 3. The sound of crushing rang out from the top of the building as Ryuk crushed the watch into nothing. Seems like she's truly relentless. Just as I thought, Ryuk mused to himself, as he let the crushed pieces of the Apex watch slowly fall from his palm, soaring down before shattering into the ground, scattering away with some parts falling into slits on the road that led to the sewers. But how is Host supposed to find Asteralxia with his watch having been broken down? The system notification flashed. But then, a light flashed in Ryuk's eyes as he opened his palm, and on it was a tiny strand of a motherboard that blinked with a blue light. Smart. The system complimented as Ryuk smiled. He, of course, wouldn't crush the entirety of the watch just because it was being tracked. He had to still save up for his deal that he made for the 10 liters, and that included finding Astralaxia. He couldn't do that without wasting an insane amount of time, except if he had her tracking, which was integrated in this motherboard that he had tweaked with his nanobots. Now, he only needed to integrate this back into another device before he'd be able to find her location. There's no need to dilly-dally anymore. Unless I reach the Eternity Stage power level, my chances of seeing Morgane are low. What if her mind is tweaked by her mother into believing Host has committed a grievous offense and maybe ran away? The system asked, as Ryuk shrugged his shoulder. She was just as suspicious as me when entering that portal and could tell something was wrong with the half-fallen one. If I didn't return, her chances of believing her words are low. And excluding that, I trust Morgane. Simple lies won't work on her. What if they did? The system said as Ryuk's eyes flashed. But then he cooled off as a confident smile appeared on his lips. They won't. Now, let me look for Asteralxia and finish the deal I made to the 10 liters. Learn all I can about the Null and then find a way to improve my strength. Ryuk muttered, forming a mini-plan map in his head before he slowly stepped off from the top of the building. A portal soon appearing before him, and he entered into it, soaring away from the scene. The sound of billowing heavy waves and powerful lightning streaking across the sky was the noise that filled the world before Ryuk, as his eyebrows furrowed slightly. In his hands was a device that held the image of some sort of map with a beeping red light. He took a glance at it once more before looking at the sea before him. It was a monstrous, heart-pounding body of water that extended as far as his eyes could see. So much so that even his senses couldn't reach their end. And what's more, according to the device in his hand, Astralaxia was somewhere deep in these stormy seas. Just what the hell could she be doing here? He muttered under his breath. But then, Ryuk's eyes steeled, as he put the device away and began walking toward the large storm. The lightning in the sky crackled even more loudly, the deafening sound creating an echo that would have sent any mortal soul reconsidering their choice to enter the sea. But not Ryuk. He continued his walk, his body sinking deeper and deeper before the waves rose high up and slammed down toward him, burying him completely, and before any mortal eyes, Ryuk was gone. It was like a bullet shot through the sea, creating a long line that pierced downward. But instead of stopping, this line's momentum only increased even more as time passed, as he kept piercing down into the deep waves. It was dark, pitch dark, and when Ryuk asked the system, it replied, Host has been swimming for exactly 3 days now. 3 days, and yet to see any fishes at all? Ryuk muttered to himself in slight disbelief, but continued down nonetheless. According to the tracker, Aster was somewhere here. And Ryuk could guess if he just kept moving down toward the ground that seemed as if it wouldn't end. Then it shouldn't take that long before he gets a clue. And really, it didn't take that long at all, as he watched his own hair begin rising on his skin, and in the next instant, a gigantic maw shot past Ryuk's side, appearing and covering his entire body, and immediately it clamped down. The snapping sound caused a tremendous wave that shot through the entire world of water. Silence eventually came to follow, as the creature was revealed. A humongous, 50-meter-long white-bellied shark, with pillars of steel for teeth and bits of scars strewn all over its surface. Its horrifying, flashing blue eyes gleamed with powerful light and a burning line, as it slowly turned its gaze to the side, where a figure was gently floating up and down rhythmically. It was none other than Ryuk, his eyes flashing in shock as he looked at the humongous body before him. When he opened his lips, water gushed forth and no words came out, as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. Seems like I can't speak underwater. Yet, this is amazing. I've never seen such a creature before, Ryuk thought in amazement. But then his eyebrows furrowed again when he slowly turned his gaze from the shark's blue eyes and looked toward its neck. And he soon came to see the new figure, a creature that seemed no different from a human, if not for the blue scales that covered the side of its face, and also grew out of its arms, chest, and a few bits from its legs. He was clad in a translucent sort of material that somehow did well in covering his body even in these depths. His eyes, just like the shark below him, gazed at Ryuk with a small crease at the side of his nose. A loud, powerful roar shot out toward Ryuk from the shark, managing to push him back by a few feet. But he soon came to a stop, eyes looking at the aquatic humanoid whose hands reached for the side of his ears. And that's when Ryuk noticed. Instead of ears, they had open slits instead, like those of a fish. Human! The words suddenly rang out loud and clear as Ryuk raised an eyebrow. You're crossing onto the great border of the Lantis Kingdom. You will not be allowed in unless you possess an Envy, the merman said. Yet, in the next second, the sound of a powerful rip reached through the world as the aquatic humanoid raised his head, only to find Ryuk's bulging arms, covered in a shimmering nanobot-like veil, holding a gigantic scythe that cleaved through the body of the shark beneath him. He himself quickly shot away from its back. A powerful wave blew as Ryuk cleaved his scythe through the entire creature, slicing it into two before its entire body exploded with a loud bang of flesh, sending body parts and blood swarming through the area of water. But then it was dispersed with a powerful wave from Ryuk that blew it far away from him, as he slowly turned his head to the side where the aquatic man stood, his jaw hanging in the water, his eyes looking disbelievingly at the remnants of the shark. In the next instant, Ryuk's scythe disappeared, but with a few tweaks, his nanobots shimmered around his ear, and soon, at the side of his head, a new creation no different form of fish's slits was made. One that seemed no different from the one the aquatic human had used to talk. And Ryuk opened his lips once more. This time, the feeling of water gushing in and trying to stop his speech didn't work, as he found himself able to regain his vocal control once more. His nanobot's veil had adapted themselves to being able to communicate beneath the sea, as fast as a snap. Forgive me for the barbaricness. It's just that the shark would have swallowed me whole if I'd been just a second late to react previously. It tried to kill me at first sight, and that's something I can't overlook. Now, what was it you were saying again? Ryuk asked, but then he watched as a powerful aura blew through the entire seas, pushing him back for 100 meters before he came to a stop. When he looked before him, he found the aquatic man holding a gigantic weapon that seemed like a fork with the exact same 3 heads, and slowly he pointed it to him, as his blue scales began shining forth with light. You have killed the Beast of Eye, an Atlantis soldier, and proven yourself an enemy of the Lantis Kingdom. I will end you here and now.